Hello, everyone. The world famous Settlers Lament back here again. And today we are going to be talking about an extremely important topic. Is Trump still based? And I don't really have much in terms of preliminaries to get started here, other than to say that it is 100% 21st reaction's fault that we're late. Now, I would say that it's Vince Doe's here fault that we're late because he was the last person to join the stream. But I can't do that because he has more subscribers than me. So he's just more important than me. And he's more important than 21st, certainly. So automatically, the fault for being late bumps on to the next most recent person to have been late. And fortunately, it's 21st doesn't have that many subscribers. So we don't need to bump on to the next person either. So 21st, it's your fault. Though I did, in terms of 21st subscriber count, I do think it's worth noting that he just recently hit the 1,000 mark, which I do believe you're planning a stream for. Isn't that the case?
Yes, I was thinking that sounds right. Yeah.
Okay, cool. But yes, I don't I don't really have much to get started with here today. The point of the stream is pretty self-explanatory. As I'm sure everyone watching knows, just last Tuesday, Trump announced that he's running for president, something that was long expected in 2024, and that he's going to be running for the nomination in particular for the Republican Party. And I'm honestly very undecided about this. I really don't know where I stand. If it would be, I guess there's three possible positions I could hold. Either that it's all just fake and doesn't matter and should be ignored, which is not my position, but that's a potential position I think some people hold. Two, that Trump isn't a very good candidate and that someone else, probably DeSantis, would be better. Or three, that Trump is a good candidate and he should be supported. Those are really like the three possible positions I could hold. And I'm not really sure which of those three I do or should hold. I'm just kind of undecided at this point. I would say that, I am grateful for a lot of what Trump did. I think he accomplished some good things. I think he easily was the best president in several decades at least. But I'm still pretty critical of his tenure in several ways. I'll get more into depth on this later in the stream, but I would say basically my number one criticism of Trump is I think he always had pretty severe problems with personnel, having people around him that just weren't very good, and that were sabotaging his agenda. And I really haven't seen that he's shown any evidence that he's able to improve on this much. And that's my number one concern, and that's the really that's the main reason that I am sympathetic towards DeSantis. Is I think he's demonstrated that he actually is good on the issue of personnel. But still, like I said, I'm very undecided on this, and especially since a lot of people in these circles I have noticed really dislike DeSantis, and I'm not totally sure why, to be honest. That I hope we'll hear a bit about that tonight. The main argument, which I don't find totally uncompelling, I think there's some weight to it, against DeSantis is that he's controlled by the establishment, or a lot of the establishment figures are around him. And I do have to admit that, if I were to support the same candidate that Ben Shapiro supports, that does give me a little bit of pause. But still, it's still on most objective grounds. It seems that DeSantis is just as good on at most of the issues as Trump is. And it also seems to me that he would be better on personnel. So I'm not really sure why I shouldn't support him. But that's basically what we'll be talking about tonight. We'll also be talking a bit about the announcement speech that Trump did last week. I have some notes on that. We might play some clips. There's one clip in particular that I'd like to play at one point, but we'll get around to that a bit later. So does anyone with that starting bit of information, is there anything that anyone would like to say?
Sure. Personally, on the DeSantis Trump contest, if you want to call it that, I don't think it's really going to matter. I think DeSantis knows which side his bread is buttered on, and that if he was to go up against Trump, he would be destroyed, basically. I don't think there's any way that in a primary between Trump and DeSantis that DeSantis could win. DeSantis may be a better candidate at the national level, but in the primary, the Republican base is fully 100% behind Trump. So that's the problem. And DeSantis, if you've listened to sort of what he said on this, he's been very quiet about it. He's not really wanting to go against Trump. He's made no indication that he wants to run this time. So I just really don't think it's going to happen. I think the DeSantis v. Trump meme, if you want to call it that, has been kind of pushed by basically GOP party hacks or neocons to try and get someone viable who the base might like in there to sort of take a hammer to Trump. So that's kind of that's sort of what I see on that. So whether or not DeSantis is the preferred choice, I just think there's basically zero chance that he'll be able to run this time around. I don't even think he's going to try. I'd be extremely surprised if he did. So yeah, that's my my take on that.
Yeah, I think on the personnel question, I mean, I would basically say the opposite of what Settler said earlier. First and foremost, on the issue of Trump himself, I think a lot of the staffing errors that you saw in the first administration won't be repeated, largely because a lot of that sort of inner circle of Republican floaters, DC staffers, I mean, they've all basically stabbed him in the back after the election or in the few years since. You look at other aspects of this too. Ivanka Trump said she's not going to be involved in politics anymore. I don't know what the implication is of there with Jared, but I've even heard rumors that like Trump's basically done with Jared or whatever on that front. So
yeah, I think Jared has said he's not going to be involved.
God willing. God, I hope.
But then we look at the other side of this, right? You might look at DeSantis's inner circle now and say there's not really any gigantic red flag, but also consider the fact that it's a governorship. He doesn't need a massive circle. So you could say that's kind of undecided, unsettled. I would say like if Christina Pushaw is like DeSantis's kind of top person who floats around him, I don't think she's much to write home about. But my big thing is that from what I've seen, the way that DeSantis operates within Florida politics, this is kind of an insider info thing, but I'll give you one example. Ron DeSantis, during his campaign events this past year, specifically requested that Matt Gaetz and Anthony Sabatini not be invited, not be allowed anywhere near DeSantis. Okay. So you can think what you want about that. But what that shows to me is, number one, he has an aversion to like the really hard right, like based MAGA crowd or whatever. Right. And so that's number one. And then number two, I think that when Ron hypothetically gets into office, the way I see this playing out is that all of these sort of establishment people who would have pushed him in there, the kind of just DC beltway that would have hypothetically helped him stop Trump and got him elected. I mean, we know what happens in politics. These people are going to come back asking for favors, and they're going to be like, hey, okay, we got you elected. Now put our guys in this and staff. That's how politics generally works. And I don't think that Ron DeSantis has the personality or really the willpower or the anything to fend that off. Long story short, I think that the personnel around a hypothetical DeSantis presidential administration will be, just your, George Bush National Review class of people. I think the evidence is actually very strong on that front. And Trump, even the second term, maybe his personnel decisions won't be perfect, but I think that Trump is a lot more open and accessible to sort of the grassroots base, the harder right people, the sort of populist circle, whatever. I think he's a lot more accessible. We can get some of our guys in there, as kind of what happened in the first term, whereas with DeSantis, I think that's a roadblock there. Like we're not going to be able to really get any of the guys we want in there. Just seeing how hard he is to access and whatnot, again, the way I've seen him operate here. And on the other hand, like I said, I think DC is going to call back for all of their favors. And that's who you're going to see staffing a hypothetical DeSantis White House.
Yeah, no, I mean, those are really good points. I mean, I'm sure that you pay much closer attention to this than I do. To Mr. Patriarch's point, I mean, I don't know. I mean, again, I'm not claiming to be an expert on any of this, but the impression I've gotten is that DeSantis. It does seem to me like DeSantis has indicated he's at least interested in running in for the Republican primary. I mean, it might it might just be that he's doing this to like keep up his national name recognition for actually 2028.
Yeah.
But I know. I mean, I do definitely agree that realistically, yeah, I think it's like if he does run, there's a very small chance he'd be able to defeat Trump. And even if he did defeat Trump, there's the problem that Trump could just run on as a third party and make DeSantis unelectable.
Not just that, but if DeSantis did run against Trump, the Republican base would see that as a betrayal, and I think DeSantis knows that. So, for that reason, for the interest of self-preservation, I don't think he's going to do it.
Yeah, I mean, I would say though that I would say though that I know. I mean, I do think ultimately Trump will be able to have like 35 to 40% of the Republican base that will vote and show up for him absolutely no matter what in the primaries. But I mean, I would say his poll numbers, I really don't think they're as impressive as you would expect from a former president. I mean, like most recent things I think I've been seeing is like only hovering around 50%, which, yeah, I know that that's enough to like sweep the nomination very easily. But still, it doesn't seem like a great trajectory for me. I would expect higher from a former president, especially one that was generally as popular as Trump was. So I mean, again, I'm confident that Trump would probably win the nomination. That it would only be a very small chance that anyone could possibly beat him, even in the best circumstances. So I do generally agree with you on that, but it does seem to me like he's given at least some indications that he's interested in running. But to what you were saying, Vince, like I said, I'm sure you pay a lot closer attention to this than I do. And a lot of what you said seemed reasonable to me. I suppose one of the things that I was weighing quite highly was that my understanding, and I mean, I could even be wrong about this, but isn't it the case that the state doctor, I don't know what it's called, but like the state equivalent of Anthony Fauci in Florida is like a pretty conservative figure. Isn't that true?
Yeah, I mean that's true. Yeah, he's great. Yeah.
Yeah. So no, I mean, and was that specifically appointed by DeSantis?
I believe so. I'm not actually sure how that. I'm pretty sure he was. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, no, I mean that was something.
The thing about Trump, even as someone who isn't entirely guaranteed to vote for him in the primary, is that like DeSantis, like his appointees might be decent, but like I doubt he'll appoint someone like Stephen Miller or what's his name? Even Rex Tillerson. He actually apparently I heard that the State Department wanted to get rid of him over him wanting to be non-interventionist. And listen, I even think Jeff Sessions wasn't that bad of a attorney general pick. I liked him when he was a senator a lot more, but Trump has a tendency to push for people who are like maybe 1 or 2 degrees of separation from you or I. While DeSantis, it's a lot more of a closed club, and that's someone who generally supports him. That's one of his biggest weaknesses, in my opinion. I'm not like I'm not like I know there's a lot of detractors of Trump on Twitter who tend to be like neocons, and like I'm not really in that crowd. But that is definitely arguably his biggest weakness, that he isn't as accessible to people like you or I. In fact, although I did hear a funny story where he basically some like sycophants who were trying to get into the DeSantis admin where DeSantis decided to give them like menial chores, like telling them to like get him a McDonald's meal or something like that. Where these were people who were like lobbyists who were trying to associate him, and he basically just made them do the most mundane, boring shit possible just to like humiliate them. So I don't think his instincts are terrible. They're just not like DeSantis is like maybe a B tier in terms of instincts when it comes to hiring, while Trump is more like an A or a B plus. And he can't have everything. He can't have everything.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of that, though, is that DeSantis right now, he doesn't really have to have a big inner circle. You know, he's the governor, right? But when I do look at the people we know who is in his inner circle, it's just like there's no one there that really stands out to me that's like, I really like this person. You know, they're all basically kind of run-of-the-mill, lukewarm. Like, they're okay. You know, that's kind of is what it is. I think with Trump, you know, he had some very terrible advisors, obviously, but he also had like some very good ones, right? Like your Bannons, your Cortezes, whatever. And I don't see those people having any presence in the DeSantis administration, hypothetically, because you don't even see those people right there right now, you know, while he's governor. And like I said, I think our sphere and the kind of people we like, it is. I think Trump is a lot more open to them, generally speaking, than DeSantis, right? And then regarding DeSantis's inner circle, like I said, it's just kind of like, yeah, it's just small right now. You can't really say much about it. Fine. But like I said, when it comes to those staffing decisions come January 2025, I think that it's going to go how it usually goes in politics, which is whoever kind of called up the favors during the election and whoever got behind his campaign and all that stuff, they're going to be the ones who have a lot of say, a lot of pull here. I don't know if DeSantis is really going to be the guy who's going to, you know, shake his fist at the establishment and say, no, I'm picking all my guys or whatever. I just don't see that happening, you know?
Yeah,
Yeah.
no, I mean that's those are all very good points. And yeah, I mean, I definitely agree that even if DeSantis is personally really based, that, you know, nothing comes for free in politics.
Yeah.
And that's a sort of permanent problem we have. But yeah, so no, I mean, those are very compelling points. Sorry, go ahead, Paternalist. I think you were going to say.
Yeah, the way I view the primary is I will vote for Trump in the primary if I believe he has truly changed. And he has hinted at some changes in the second admin. Although what will really prove whether he's changed or not is how he conducts himself on the campaign trail. And Vince, I saw your video on, you know, Trump versus DeSantis in the primary. I do think him challenging him from the right might actually help Trump. Or no, not him challenging him might force Trump to move to the right a bit. In order
Yeah,
to,
and I think it'll just force him to run a more competent, organized, high energy operation. You know, he's just gonna have to, and I think that'll be good.
Yeah, I mean, so I agree with a lot of what you've said, Vince. I'd say, you know, it's not this isn't even necessarily a point towards DeSantis, but one of my main concerns with Trump is it's always seemed to me like Trump isn't very ideological. Which, I mean, I think that's how he gets a lot of his populist appeal, that he not just that he isn't a politician, but he isn't thinking like how politicians normally act because he's not ideological. But I think that's why he was able to be controlled by people like Kushner, is because it seems to me, and I could be wrong with this, but it seems to me that in Trump's first term, he very often was just he just supported people that supported him. And that was the main metric he was evaluating these things through, is like, does this person like me? Not does this person have my same agenda? I mean, of course, I mean, I understand it's a bit of a different thing when you're dealing with your own daughter, when you're talking about Ivanka, where I can understand why a man could be more influenced by someone like her than anyone. But you know, she might be the most extreme case where she's clearly just a Democrat that managed to get Democrat policies passed under a Republican president. But still, there were a lot of bad magnets around him. That yes, I do agree that I think one of the really positive things is, with all the fallout from the previous presidential election, a lot of those people have just permanently burnt bridges with Trump. But it's still something I'm very concerned about with a future Trump presidency. That it seems to me, and again, I could be wrong here, but it seems to me that that Trump is open to infiltration by people just for being nice to him.
Yeah, I mean that's a valid criticism, but like you kind of alluded to, I think that the difference in the second term is going to be that kind of those bad actors, those bad apples, have basically all, you know, exposed themselves. And you know, Trump is big on loyalty, obviously, to a fault to an extent, but I think in this case it'll also be to his strength, because all of those bad apples obviously have now turned their back, betrayed him, stabbed him in the back. And I think in the second term, he's going to be motivated by a strong wanting to now see those people fail or get back at those people, right? And I think that'll help. So
some, I don't know, maybe a month or two ago, Aaron McIntyre had on a guest, I can't remember his name, who was a member of the staff of the Trump presidency. And Aaron was asking him a bunch of these sorts of questions about the issues with staffing, issues with institutional backlash and intransigency. And this guy seemed to be well aware of the problem, but his solutions were to basically try to partner with a lot of sort of traditional con Inc. institutions, like the Hillsdale and places like this. So I think that certain members of the Trump administration are pretty keenly aware that this problem exists, but I'm not entirely convinced. Pretty worried actually that the staff picks that they'll get will just be sort of boilerplate. Yes, let's lower taxes and sort of maintain foreign policy. Like nothing's going to change. Like foreign policy will still be dictated by the same people who are in the State Department today. That sort of thing. And you're kind of seeing this a little bit with other political movements sort of across the world. So like with Giorgia Meloni, for example, on paper, she's like this far right candidate, quote unquote. But the thing is if you actually listen to her on foreign policy, and I think this is key, she's really not interested in sort of bucking the trends there and sort of supporting the global American empire. And I think that's kind of the linchpin for all of this. And you can just sort of see by the treatment of the media on her, they've been basically giving her kid gloves. Like I saw a literal kind of almost a puff piece written by the New York Times on Meloni. So I really do think, and this is also sort of why when I look at the Trump versus DeSantis question, I'm instinctively more, just sort of on an instinctual basis, more favorable to Trump, because the regime is actually scared of him. I don't think anyone can disagree with that. And it might be for stupid reasons, like, he's going to reinstitute slavery or something. That's sort of like a progressive take. But the people with actual power who do sort of call the shots, particularly in the foreign policy space, I think are quite aware of the fact that if he did sort of get wise to their game and was ruthless in sort of prosecuting his agenda, he really could tip over their apple cart, and they're scared of that. Whereas they're not scared of that with DeSantis.
Yeah, I mean, I think the administrative state has like really now labeled him a threat to the entire thing, which you could say they always talked like that, I guess, but it's definitely on a different level now, right? The past 2 years, the level to which, the State Department, all the intelligence agencies are clearly fearful of Trump and all that. And maybe to the extent to which in the first administration, they thought they could try to infiltrate, just subvert. Yeah. I think they've even like those entities have burned the bridge so bad with Trump. I just don't see it happening again.
I don't know. The thing I'm worried about is that it will be sort of a replay of 2016. So he'll get in there, he'll have these ideas, but then he'll just get, he'll have to get these positions filled. He'll be like, Hillsdale, like who you're gonna give me, and there'll be these Macmillan type of quote unquote conservatives, because the real machinery of state, particularly on the foreign policy angle, and the one with the most to lose is the State Department, which, as far as I can tell, is driven by this insane sort of neocon ideology and just this weird self-perpetuating momentum, which sort of existed beyond its natural lifespan after the end of the Cold War. Like the foreign policy agenda of the United States is still acting like it's built for dealing with the realities of the Cold War and fighting the Soviet Union is what it's really designed for. And sort of in the absence of that, it's not fit for purpose. And, in order to sort of cement its control, it sort of goes with these sort of subversive, global homo policy agendas and is entirely consumed with maintaining hegemony and power at all costs, at the expense of the American people, at the expense of our allies. And I think that is kind of the real boss in the which needs to be overcome within the American state. So, and unless that happens, and Trump could just sort of be playing his cards close to his chest. He doesn't want to say, my fellow Americans, I'm going to take an axe to the deep state and like take what's that lady's name? The shit, I forgot. Anyways, some sort of State Department lady. We're gonna reel her out of town on a rail. That would be great. I'd love to hear that, but it might not be the best, most prudent kind of attack to sort of openly say that. Yeah, Victoria Nuland. Yeah, we're gonna like cart Victoria Nuland out of town and tar and feather her. So, yeah.
I mean, I don't know. I think when it came to foreign policy in the State Department, I don't know if I'd say that's really the top concern in DC right now, because you look kind of under the Trump's first term when it came to foreign policy. There were things left to be desired. Yeah, he almost started war with Iran and stuff. But overall, I would say it really wasn't that out of line with what we kind of wanted in 2016.
No,
right?
What I'm saying is the State Department was against him.
Yeah.
And that's the problem. And I think they were instrumental. And if you sort of listen to, some of the testimony that came out of like General Milley or whatever, they're like, yeah, we lied to him about forces and presence in Syria. He'd give us this order, we disregard it, blah, 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 so on and so forth, So Trump did what he could, but the problem is like the machinery of state, and there's just this one government department, which has tremendous influence internationally. It totally sandbagged him and did everything they could to humiliate him and get him out of office. So it's kind of it's less a Trump problem and more of a institutional problem.
What my point on that is kind of that I think I'm honestly not an expert on how all of the administrative agencies, each of them subverts the United States, but I feel like with our domestic kind of based agencies, the threat is still there and arguably maybe more. I don't know. You look at, because in terms of Trump's presidency, like I think what really disappointed was more so domestic policy than foreign policy, right? I don't know if that's all because of the agencies, but my point being, I don't know if it's like just a State Department issue. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, on the issue of policy, so less of a Trump DeSantis thing, but I just in preparation for this, I watched the Trump's announcement speech, and I kept notes, as I think I said at the beginning, and so like I said, this isn't really a Trump DeSantis thing. This is more just criticisms of Trump, and I imagine a lot of people agree on this, but still, I just want to go through some of this that. I found it a pretty lackluster speech. Now, I imagine the general analysis I've heard is that he's trying to not sound as like wacky and out there as he has sometimes to try and assuage people that are that have been put off in the past from his style. I'm assuming that's why it was a lot tighter of a speech and he used a lot less rhetoric than he normally did. But that's just a question of rhetoric. I'm not too concerned about that. The main issue is with the policy that he talked about. I found there was very little new policy that I found was particularly compelling. It's not, he talked about illegal immigration a lot. That's cool. He talked about inflation. Yeah, that's obviously a very important issue. There was the constant racial pandering, which was annoying. But but I'd say like two of my biggest issues I had with it. One is I didn't really hear him talk explicitly about legal immigration at all. Now, I know Paternalist has told me many times about how Trump was actually very effective at reducing illegal immigration, and that's good. But I still find it concerning that all his focus seems to have been on illegal immigration in the speech. And consequences from that, like fentanyl coming across the border. And those are issues and everything, but still, I found that somewhat concerning that was his focus when he talked about immigration.
I think part of it is that like talking about like the Raise Act doesn't really rile people up the same way that talking about like fentanyl deaths do.
Yeah,
right?
yeah, that's true.
Yeah, I mean, it's just, I mean, I think in general, most Americans, especially most sort of conservative aligned Americans, don't like mass immigration. I mean, if you were to just say something like, "There's too much immigration going on, we need to end mass immigration," like I don't need him to say we need this specific number of immigrants coming across each year, but we need to reduce it by 80%. Like I know he's not like a wonk, he's not going to be giving wonky answers like that. But if he could, if like end mass immigration could be a slogan of him, that would be something that would assuage these fears of mine quite a bit. But more specifically, something I've really found concerning is he said we built the wall, we completed it, and we had some additions to do. Now, I mean, it's nice the border fencing that he did during his administration is nice and everything. And it's not like I'm an expert on this. Again, I don't know exactly how much of the border was fenced, but it doesn't really seem to me like he got anywhere close to the big beautiful wall that we were promised. Now, I know like big beautiful wall, that's hyperbolic language. I know I'm not expecting like the Great Wall of Trump. But still, it does not appear to me like there's actually complete border fencing done. And yeah, I know they're like the not literally every inch of the border needs a fence on it, but it sounds concerning to me that he is saying that the wall is a thing he's already finished, because that would imply that it's not really a priority to continue with it, even if he were to be reelected.
Well, the thing about the wall is that if you actually look at it, there is a thing where a lot of the pre-existing wall is basically just two cars stacked on top of each other, or like a tiny little fence. And when you take that into account, he's built about 700 miles. I think he should build more, obviously, but a lot of the wall that already existed was basically next to nothing. Like anyone who's motivated enough can climb that wall in the span of minutes, and it's been replaced. Admittedly, not by like 50-foot tall, like Attack on Titan style, like massive stone brick walls, but like we weren't going to get that anyway.
Yeah, no, I mean, I know the term wall can be a bit hyperbolic, so that's not really the main issue. But sorry, did you have more to say, Paternal?
No, I think I made my point rather clear.
Okay.
There is like there's about 500, 600 miles left. He built about 700 to 800. I'm pretty sure when you factor in wall that got replaced with actual wall instead of just like two cars that are like cinder block put together. You can just climb over. So yeah.
So I mean, this is something I'm concerned about. I'd say another thing I was concerned from his speech about is he did talk about some stuff, like he was talking about getting rid of, I don't know the term he used, but like getting rid of like insane people in some leadership positions in the military and stuff like that. And yeah, that's great. But considering how central to the downfall of the Trump presidency was his betrayal by elements of, as we were talking about, the State Department and people in leading positions in the government, I again found it sort of disconcerting that he didn't give more focus on that. Again, I know Trump isn't like a wonky guy. We're not going to get him to say we need to get rid of this specific number of people from the bureaucracy, but it's still. I mean, I know he said like get rid of corrupt people in DC, haul it out top to bottom. A bit more focus on that, I would have found. I would have found nice. I mean, it just sort of felt like drain the swamp to me again, which didn't seem particularly effective. So I'm not. Again, I guess this is stuff we've already talked about to some degree, but it didn't seem to me like he really understands the depth to which personnel in the federal bureaucracy and in his administration was a major block to getting his agenda done.
I think kind of I'll kind of talk about both of those. So, I think they're valid criticisms, but I don't know. I think that you might be reading into it a little bit too much. Like on the immigration front, Trump in his first term, I believe he cut legal immigration by half. Border crossings by the end of his presidency were down pretty low. We might not get the immigration moratorium or 1924 Part 2 that we want out of Trump's second presidency, and we should push as hard as we can on that front. But I don't know. Does anyone really doubt that Trump won't be decent at least on the immigration issue? Right? We should obviously push him and his administration to get everything we want. But, even you go back to the 2015 announcement speech, that focused big on illegal immigration too. I don't think, from my memory, I don't think legal immigration was really even talked about there. The focus on the campaign trail, at least, is always going to be on that, because that's the real culture war issue that, someone said earlier, that really gets people riled up. And then, I don't know, on the second front, that is admittedly maybe a shortcoming of Trump, that he doesn't understand the whole scene the way maybe this career policy type will or whatever. But, I don't know. I think he will at least, he at least has a better understanding of that than any other Republican option that we have. He might not drain the entire swamp over the next 4 years or whatever, but I don't know. I just kind of see him as the best chance, the best shot to at least get something done, maybe get something started on that front,
if you look at I think Trump, the bare minimum is, the public charge rule, right? The rule which basically states that if you are on public assistance of some kind, you cannot get permanent residency, green card, or citizenship. Immigration, which at the time had already been reduced by 50%, would be reduced again due to this law, which SCOTUS upheld. So it was on the books till Biden got rid of it, by an additional 65%. So actually, let me do the math. 0.5 times 0.35. That would be about a 82% decrease in immigration if he went through second term versus when he started it. So that's practically 1924 levels. 1924 didn't get rid of, it had other things obviously, but he actually looked at the level it got rid of, reduced it by about 85 to 90%. I think the thing about the public charge rule is, because it involves the budget, you can technically make a case to pass it in the Senate without needing 60 votes. So that's something that I think Trump I don't know. It might require 60 votes. It might not, because it relates to money and financing. So I think that needs to get passed under a second Trump admin. It could be passed. If we can do it via budget reconciliation, we can get it done pretty easily, as long as no one cucking, which we can't always rely on. Because, you have Murkowski, you have Mitt Romney, etc. But
maybe not for long with Murkowski. They're still counting the votes, but she's still behind.
So sorry, how was that put in place in the first place?
Okay, so Trump just basically made it a policy as part of the DHS. Then the Supreme Court upheld it, and then Biden got rid of it.
Okay, then why couldn't he just restore it as a policy without needing?
He could. He could. I just want it to be put to a vote so it's permanent. That's my main concern, really.
Okay, yeah, no, that makes sense. But yeah, no. I think what you're saying, Vince, is very reasonable. And sorry, also, I meant to say this at the beginning. I forgot about it. I've promoted this group previously on here before, but I would just like to recommend everyone check out that Vince is a part of American Virtue, which is sort of like PragerU but based, I guess is the easiest way to put it. PragerU, but not terrible. As I was saying before the stream started, there's a serious problem on right-wing YouTube, where if you had a Venn diagram of all the people who are based and all the people who make well-produced content, they're almost two completely separate circles. And I am, of course, myself a major person with that has that problem. My actual videos are all just like terrible PowerPoints basically, and my live streams are just, they're StreamYards like this. But American Virtue is one of very few right-wing channels that is based and does very well edited videos. So I really would recommend you guys check them out. I don't have them linked in the description. I guess I'll pin it on the live chat. But it's very good. I'd highly recommend you guys check it out. And Vince has his own channel also, which I've linked in the description. But just what I was thinking about, I wanted to shill it now since I know most people aren't around for the very end of the stream to listen to the shilling. Is there anything you want to say about that, Vince?
You put it well. Yeah, go subscribe to both channels, I guess.
Okay.
Yeah, one thing that so are we gonna get to like other people? Like, Trump, there's a big issue that people debate on. Does Trump make good endorsements? Does he make bad endorsements? The thing about Trump is that DeSantis also, I'm pretty sure DeSantis campaigned with Mastriano, so like he's not like, but Trump like endorsed JD Vance while he was still like in second place. And he doesn't solely care about his voting record because for all we knew, JD Vance could have gotten second or third in the primary. But thanks to his endorsement, he put him over the edge. And JD Vance, like, as I said, or I said it before the stream started, you look at like who he follows on Twitter, and he'll follow like a 300 follower, like dissident right, like count that makes these long-winded threads on like really esoteric shit. And I'm pretty sure like settlers on, Dave the Distributist, right?
Do I know Dave the Distributist?
I mean,
yes,
I've never heard of him.
Obviously you do, but like
Yes.
he followed. I'm pretty sure he followed his old account on Twitter, like the previous one before it got shut down and replaced. So like this, and it's a shame Blake Masters didn't get in, but I'm pretty sure if he runs for like a House seat or something, he'll probably be in the same boat. And you also not all of the candidates he endorsed won, sadly this time, but Trump has a pretty good instincts when it comes to endorsements. The only one I don't like was his governor endorsement, but obviously I voted for Mastriano, but I wanted Barletta. But you can't have everything, I guess.
Well, I mean, what about Oz? Was that a good endorsement?
Of the people who were available, I would say he was the least bad candidate running.
Okay, yeah, no, I mean that I know Pennsylvania, it's not a red state, so that's fair. But I do really like Vance and Blake Masters, I think obviously there's lots of issues in Arizona, but even if Masters was a more difficult candidate to win, I think it was worth taking that shot to get a candidate that actually was good.
Yeah, imagine Jim Layman in the Senate. He'd be like a completely ineffectual guy who like doesn't give anything refreshing or new to the table. But like, if you're only like plus if you're running as a candidate is that you're electable, I just probably am not going to vote for you in a primary. It's like, oh, well, we have to vote for Mitt Romney over, I don't know, insert like rather based Utah state representative here for Senate because he's electable or something stupid like that. Like, and that's a meta debate that's been on the dissident right, especially in some of the circles that Vince has been for a long time, actually. Like,
I think. Go ahead.
No, you can go ahead, actually.
Thanks. I think the thing about the Trump endorsement is a lot of them, yeah, he kind of just picks the random person who's in front and it's sort of like whatever. But I think with anyone else playing kingmaker in the Republican Party that, is in the position to do it, I don't think you would have ever gotten an endorsement of like a JD Vance, a Blake Masters, whatever. You could point to the fact that, well, Ron DeSantis campaigned for Mastriano, he campaigned for Masters and Lake, so who's to say that? But also, those were like the general election Republican candidate already, so it's a totally safe thing for DeSantis to do. He doesn't have to like burn anyone's bridge or whatever to do that. And I think, generally speaking, that's the thing with Trump overall is that for every just lukewarm or establishment thing you get also the possibility that you can pick someone really good or do something really good. With Ron playing kingmaker hypothetically, I just don't see the evidence that he would do that. And maybe to Ron's credit, I don't know if he would even be as involved, right? Because historically, most presidents of either party or whoever's leading the party, they don't have the sheer endorsement power that Trump has or whatever. So I don't know. But, just point being,
the only endorsement he made in the primaries that was like high profile, I'm pretty sure was Laxalt, although he was kind of
which was his friend. Yeah, his friend or whatever. Yeah.
And it's kind of funny. I'm pretty sure Dr. Oz was like personal friends with Trump, and that's why he endorsed him. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, everyone now is going back and playing Monday morning quarterback with all of Trump's candidates or whatever. But I mean, you look at Oz, I would have preferred Parnell, right, he probably would have actually won.
Yeah, that was tragic. The fact that he got screwed over by the court and basically had to like abandon his campaign to like.
Yeah, it was. But you know, people who think McCormick, who has $1 billion in investment in China and was like pro free trade in his past, like if the issue was that Oz was too lukewarm, he wasn't inspiring enough, or people thought he was like, people bought all the Fetterman talking points about him being some type of like New Jersey sellout or whatever. I mean, the idea that like McCormick would not have been worse optically in every single aspect, I just, I find that just total like, yeah, Monday morning quarterback behavior. And I think that's the case with a lot of Trump's candidates this sort of cycle. They say, oh, it was bad candidate, bad campaign, because
therefore we must vote. We have to vote for Kimberly Lee for like Arizona Senate in 2024, like some milk toast woman.
Right. I mean, and Blake Masters ran. People will say certain things, but Blake Master ran a fantastic campaign. He barnstormed really hard. It was, he was underfunded. Obviously, Mitch kind of played softball with him there. But the idea that like Blake was a bad candidate, or he was not rhetorically convincing, or he did not run a very like focused, hard campaign, I don't really buy that. I think he really did the best anyone could have in that situation, in my opinion. I don't know.
Yeah, imagine Mark Brnovich is not as the nominee. I don't think he would have done much better, to be honest.
Yeah, exactly.
Who knows? Maybe he'll run for Senate in 2024. Maybe he'll run for a House seat. I don't know. He has a future in something that I'm certain of.
Definitely, yeah. I would say probably go for Congress, but then again,
I think Andy Biggs should run for Senate and he should run for Congress.
Yeah. That'd be good.
Those are fair points. Like I said, Masters loss was probably the most disappointing thing in the election last in the midterms. I guess I don't really remember the 2020 the elections in 2020 for the non-presidential stuff very well. But what was this not a complaint going back till then that Trump's endorsements weren't very successful then too?
Yeah, it's been a thing throughout like the entirety of his presidency. You have people like, oh, why didn't he endorse Mo Brooks in the Alabama Senate primary in 2017? Why didn't he do this? Why didn't he do that? When like, admittedly, I don't think like, or it's something people have been sort of going back and forth about probably for about 4 to 5 years now. I think.
Yeah,
and also like you also have some sleeper endorsements like Trump. And Trump made a pretty good endorsement in North Carolina. Everybody thought Pat McCrory, who was kind of like a rather milquetoast guy, was going to be the nominee. And so Trump's like, I'm going to endorse the second best North Carolina congressman after Dan Bishop for Senate. Same thing in what's it called? In Missouri, he endorsed Eric. And either the two Erics would have been fine. Definitely a huge upgrade from Roy Blunt. Probably will be an A-tier senator. He endorsed Hawley, which I think is probably one of the best endorsements he's made. Imagine if he endorsed Austin Peterson. That would have been a disaster. But his endorsement record is mixed. You have some meh people, you have some bad people, and you have some really good people who you rarely see get involved in politics who he endorsed. So it's the one issue that it's sort of a love-hate relationship with Trump on that issue.
Yeah, I think from our perspective, it's obviously important because this is kind of like the future GOP we're trying to build, and Trump's endorsement plays a big factor. But I think that from the anti-Trump people, they kind of, in a sense, I'm talking about anti-Trump people who say, oh, he's not based enough, or I'm not talking about like the total neocon crowd, right? But the thing is that without the Trump endorsement, I think people overstate its importance to the whole scheme of like Trump, yes or no, right? Because what really would happen without the Trump endorsement? As much as people want to pretend like Trump most of the time stifles the best candidate, what would really just in reality happen is that the person with the most backing, the most money, the most support from the GOP would win like 90, 95% of the time, right? And maybe on the flip side, you just don't get that handful of really good endorsements that Trump made. So, like I said, I think the importance or the magnitude or like deciding Trump yes or no based on, well, I don't like his endorsements, I think is a little bit silly, right? Because what happens if the endorsement's not there? In a lot of cases, the same thing. And in the few exceptions where you got someone really good, that probably won't happen, so.
Yeah. It's it's like DeSantis, like often, like it's the thing about like Mo Brooks and how people are like, oh, Trump sabotaged Mo Brooks. Listen, I got hurt from that initially, but like he kind of proved to be sort of subversive after he lost and sort of went on. I'm pretty sure he went on MSNBC and was talking about how Trump was like anti-Ukraine or something. Which was,
yeah,
like,
he did.
very disappointing. I mean, Katie Britt isn't like she's sus. She's supported by a lot of sus people, but she did say that she would support basically like a version of the Raise Act. So if you actually look at the Senate this year, we didn't get any Senate flips, but if you look at the people who we replaced, we went from having a bunch of like F or D tier senators, and we have like two A tier, one B plus tier, and one S tier senator. Previously, all of them sucked. Like Rob Portman sucked, Richard Selby sucked, Richard Burr was horrible, Roy Blunt sucked, and so like, and a lot of people don't realize the House GOP is a lot more based people in it than the Senate. The Senate, I mean, obviously, it's always been the establishmentarian branch of politics. I mean, it's been that way since like the nation's inception. But like, a lot of people sort of in 2022, we have a lot of upgrades, and we have to remember that if it weren't for Trump in a lot of these races, we wouldn't have gotten them.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I think that all sounds fair. Yeah, no, I mean, I definitely think that's one of the largest positives we've gotten from Trump in general since 2016 is that he's changed the frame a lot. That there's a lot of people in politics that never would have risen to the prominence they are currently if not for the way that he's changed the narrative. So that's something I'm certainly very grateful for. So honestly, I mean, I know it hasn't been too long, but I don't really have anything else left on the agenda. If there's anything people still want to talk to, I'm happy to keep on going, but there's nothing really I have left on the agenda for today.
This just might be because I'm kind of coming at this from an outsider, because if you kind of know my current stance on politics,
Yeah.
I'm just curious as to what you guys think about what is this, if any of this means in the long term, because let's say Trump gets elected in 2024, has a great 4 years. What's to prevent a Democrat from coming in 2028 and immediately reversing all of this?
Well,
and if that's the case, what's the point?
thing is, not all of Trump's policies have been reversed. Like a lot of them have, but like not all. Like I'm pretty. It's the Supreme Court has an issue, or like the Biden admin. A lot of people were dooming that this was the end of the Republic of Biden, but a lot of the stuff he wanted to get done just didn't pass because he had such a narrow majority, and it's unlikely you will get an Obama 2008 scenario where a Democrat wins the presidency, has like 50 as a filibuster-proof majority, and causes untold amounts of damage. I don't see that happening. And even if it does happen, we have to fight these battles as they come. We can't like worry about something that's years in advance when we're have issues that are more pertinent right now.
Mm-hmm. I'm just curious as then, because I don't doubt that there are roadblocks you can put in place to try and make these victories more permanent. But I'm also just curious as to what you guys think the long-term post-Trump view of American conservatism should look like.
I think that I personally think that I don't think Tucker Carlson will run, sadly, in 2028. He probably has more influence as a TV anchor at this point than being a president. But I think let me think of some examples. I could see Vance running in 2028. He'll be up for re-election in the Senate. So if Obama was a one-term senator and he ran for president, so it's not like something that's entirely out of the question. I think Hawley in 2028 would be a pretty good Senate majority leader when we finally get rid of McConnell. Or I don't know if we can get. I don't know if it'll be a vote in the Senate or if it'll be like dying of old age that gets rid of McConnell.
That'll be a long time since he's a turtle. So
yeah, he'll be around. He'll be around at like 2200, along with Chuck Grassley, who's like 250 years old, and he'll be debating policy on the Senate floor. But I think when it comes to 2028, nobody really expected. I mean, some people did, but nobody really expected someone like the caliber of Trump to run in 2016. Yeah. So it's possible that if Trump manages to solidify this, or DeSantis, I'm not really like totally dead set against either of them. But let's say we have a really good transformative 4 years in office, then it's likely you'll see people who find a calling in politics who we don't know about right now running in 2028. So
that's basically my take on this too. Is we'll get there when we come to it, but I'm sure at that point there will be some rising star, or maybe someone we already know. I don't know. Maybe like it's just DeSantis again. Okay, whatever. But I think that's really a question to evaluate the current political scene when it gets to that, right? And that's not me saying it shouldn't be kind of in the back of our heads right now, but politics moves so fast and changes so fast. I don't know if it's the most pressing thing to even think about right now, right? Like we'll find our guy when that time comes. You know what I mean?
Well, I'm not even specifically talking about finding the right candidate. I'm just thinking, what are the ideological goals that we want to see implemented in the future, and what is the best way to implement them? And I'm thinking just that's kind of the long-term thinking I'm trying to posit here, because I'm not saying that these politics are completely insignificant, but it's more that I don't know. I'm just thinking, because for me, it's more of trying to just convince people of things that are far more permanent than just elections, if you kind of know what I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, I understand that. I think I think the long-term way conservatives take power and hold power and implement the things we want is kind of just do what you can at the federal level, and then maybe just have like I'm not saying like a national divorce, but sort of like a red state takeover, right? Like I think on the debate.
But how's that going to happen is the the $1 million question.
Well, you got to get, I mean, over time, you just got to overturn state legislatures and get some like really good governors in there, right? Which is why it's disappointing. We had a chance to kind of do that in Arizona and Pennsylvania. Both candidates fell through. But I think that's a lot more doable or achievable than saying we're going to take federal power and like just, I don't know, abolish democracy or something, right? Like, I think it's a reasonable goal to expect. Hey, we have all these like red states, especially kind of in the South and whatnot, that are really just kind of waiting to become strongholds to see the things we want, right? I think,
I think an example,
Florida is the
Mark Robinson
shell of that. You know what I mean?
I think Mark Robinson will make North Carolina the Florida of the Mid-Atlantic.
I mean, that would be nice. Personally,
the advantage of that is that everybody's going to be moving there, and it's going to drive housing prices up.
Yeah. So the thing is I think these are prudent steps to take at the local, not local, at the state and local level. I do think there's value in this. I mean, we just saw that, in 2020 with the COOF, and, how it became very clear that certain states would, not lock you up in your house and other states would. So this stuff matters. And
I mean, even
as
like
somebody,
libertarian like politicians, like I don't like Greg Abbott that much, but he currently passed I think it was like an invasion declaration. I'm pretty sure some of you may have seen it yesterday. How sincere it is, I don't know, but part of the provisions would be including gunboats on the border and making deals with foreign powers as if he was a head of state, as if Texas was a sovereign entity.
Yeah. So, and that's kind of what I'm getting at is I think it's conceivable to me that you could basically have de facto autonomy for certain states in a similar way that like Quebec has a high degree of autonomy in Canada.
Yeah.
And the way you do that is kind of how you were saying, Vince. You basically have a ruthless SOB governor who wants to manipulate procedural outcomes for the good guys this time, and takes an axe to the administrative state and all institutions which sort of stand against him, and through ostensibly democratic processes basically turns his state into a fiefdom.
Yeah.
And then as the federal government further loses capacity and power and frankly money, they have significantly less cards to play against the state governor. So
Yeah, one thing about
historically, it's always been with finances. That's how they get these people to fall in line. Well, if you want to get this funding for this or that, then you need to sort of fall in line and implement these policies, blah blah blah. So that's sort of how they got the 21 age 21 drinking age passed nationwide in the United States. Is the federal government said, look, if you want your funding for your highways, then you basically need to make your legal drinking age 21. You cannot do that. You can have to be 18, 16, 17, whatever you want. But unless you want these billions of dollars, you better change the law.
Well, the thing is, I think states need to be we need to have states that are self-sufficient as possible. For instance, Florida, a very underrated development in Floridian geopolitics. Florida is currently getting F-35s for replace their F-16s for the Air National Guard. If only we could get a self-sufficient tax base in all these red states. That could sort of keep the government running. Because quite frankly, a lot of the government in a lot of these states, and especially at the federal level, listen, I'm not that big into I'm not a free market hack or whatever, but look at Twitter. They got rid of 90% of the people in the Twitter administration, and it's still working. So I think we do have the ability to set up self-sufficient, states to a certain degree. But I think also another thing is you have to have political machines, and you have to have people doing operations on the ground. For instance, in California, the California Republican Party, which is one of the least competent parties historically for the Republicans, decided to start doing mail-in votes and ballot harvesting at living homes in California, and as a result, they're going to flip one or two House races this year that they weren't expected to. Just because they set up some grounding operation, just mail out ballots to just about everybody in a community center and a gym and a senior living home, and then manipulated the elections that way. So it's not just government; it's also NGOs and non-governmental entities that work with the government.
Yeah.
I'm glad you brought that up because I think regardless of who the nominee is in 2024, Trump or DeSantis, for either of them to win, it's going to basically take that. It's going to basically have to take some type of right-wing ballot harvesting and turnout initiative, right? Because the Democrat and obviously the electoral system they set up in 2020. I mean, people want to talk about, a certain thing we can't see on YouTube, but even aside from that, what it also does is it creates a basically impossible turnout scenario that is stacked against the Republican Party inherently, right? Because it gets through the mail-in voting, the early voting, and all that stuff. And I think Republicans just relying on the more invested, politically engaged people to turn out on election day, clearly that's not working. And clearly that just doesn't make mathematical sense. And so I think what the Republicans have to figure out permanently, and I don't like this because I don't like this idea of mass democracy where even all your unengaged masses are showing up in decisions. But if that's a system we have, then we need to basically barnstorm, obviously the nursing homes and stuff, older people vote Republican, but especially rural America, right? There's so many just plumbers, blue collar people, rural people who are not super invested in politics. They're obviously natural Republicans. They like Trump. They like conservative culture and all that. But the Republicans don't really have some type of huge turnout initiative for those people the way the Democrats do for, immigrants, people in the cities and whatnot. And I think that's just something Republicans are going to have to figure out how to do. Going back to the earlier point, though, I'm not saying to give up on federal politics, obviously, like I just talked about, this is how you need to win federal politics. But what I would also say is that I think the power of the federal government, believe it or not, is going to kind of decrease over the next few decades for a few reasons. Number one is the divided nature of our politics, right? You kind of already see this. Blue states rebelled against Trump, red states kind of rebel against Biden, right? And also, I think the competency and the ability of the federal government is just going to go down in general. Number one, because I think Patriarch said they're going to run out of money. And then number two, all this just woke diversity hire, you know what I mean, type of stuff. You're going to see real effects of that, I think, over time. Like now we talk about meritocracy, whatever. I think over the next few decades, you're genuinely going to see the federal government just not be able to enforce stuff or do stuff.
If you have departments filled by rainbow people and theater kids,
right.
The other thing is that the State Department, which is probably one of the biggest aggressors of the GAE, is right now with the conflict in Ukraine. Right now, essentially, anything less than a complete regime change in Moscow is going to be seen as a defeat by them, because they've invested so much into this. And the thing is, if peace comes out and Russia still gets to keep control over the Donbass, Crimea, and the southeastern Ukraine, well, that's just another thing on top of the Afghanistan fiasco that shows the State Department just cannot exert power as much as it used to be able to, and that's a massive blow against the American federal government.
Yeah, one thing about the elites is that they're not that competent. Like the a lot of these agencies, if the media was competent, they would there are people with a couple hundred followers on Twitter who do better analysis of do better intelligence gathering than the State Department and a lot of media enterprises. This isn't like the 1960s where we had sort of a hegemonic consensus that ruled everything unquestionably. And with the whole DEI thing, you're going to have less competent people at the helm than we have already. If you look at where the energy is, if you look at where creative energy is, it's all on the right. We might not have the best personnel, but we have is mostly funding and mostly institutional backing. If we get that to a certain extent, we win by default.
Because I think ultimately, just we probably, me being more, I guess, anti-political, you guys being more invested in the political scene, we both probably have the same goals. It's just more of a difference of how we go about it. Because I don't want to come across as hostile in any way,
Yeah, I mean, I think politics is almost always going to disappoint, and it kind of is what it is. But I also think that any just solution we manage to perpetrate is gonna have to have some political means and in political engagement, if that kind of makes sense what I'm saying. I just think that you can kind of sit outside the system and say it all sucks, but at the same time, I think you can get things you want out of the political system. You can make things better, especially at the state level. I think that's huge. The difference between different states is you can just tell, right? So I would say that some investment in politics still is a good thing and is necessary, even if we kind of understand we're probably going to be disappointed by it most of the time, if that kind of
investment in politics when you have a reasonable degree of it actually working out for you. Because for me, I cannot understand people that are just loyal to a party because they're loyal to the party, because there are people like that for both Democrat and Republican, and I just can't understand that, because the point of politics...
that to me seems like basically the entirety of conservative Christian voters in Canada. I know it's we don't need to go over Canadian politics today, but there are vanishingly few reasons for a conservative Christian to vote for the so-called Conservative Party, and yet they still have probably about a third of the Conservative Party's voters here are still conservative grandmas that vote for them because it's what a conservative Christian should do.
Yeah. No, and I think I kind of agree with Dave, the distributist takes on this, on the politics at the national level sort of thing. Because of the demographics and especially the single women and Zoomers / minorities, this coalition, I do think the Democrats kind of have it in the bag in the future going on. Not necessarily maybe in the next election, but certainly a few elections from now. But as we sort of said with the decreasing incompetence of the state, these incoming, impending crises, which everyone can see happening, and they're totally hopeless to do anything about. What sort of dispensation comes on the back end of that for the United States as a political project? I really don't know. I think that, yes, the politics does matter in the sense that getting power locally and at the state level and using that as sort of a shield against an increasingly, insane but sclerotic and incompetent federal government is a good idea. I mean, all you got to do is look at the difference between, California and Florida, and they're as different in terms of government structure as they're more different in terms of government structure than Belgium and the Netherlands. I'm sure, they might as well be two different countries, but they sort of operate within this structure of the within the federal system. So I don't see the regime being able to survive in its current form forever, but I don't think we're going to be able to vote our way out of this through the conventional methods. Now, I'm not saying we're going to get sort of like a strongman or whatever, although that can certainly happen. Crazier things have happened. But the way these crises tend to work themselves out is everyone, I think, is under the illusion that, we need to get our sort of vanguard and, our vanguard revolutionary elites, and then, sort of be ready and waiting and seize power when the moment comes. From what I can tell with history, I don't think that's actually how it works. I think usually what happens is the crisis arises, and then cometh the hour, cometh the man is essentially what occurs. So it's a much more emergent phenomenon, if I can use that word.
Well, what it reminds me of, or what I just thought about, is that a lot of the times, long-term political change or ideological or philosophical change takes a very long time, because take Confucius, one of my philosophical heroes. He attained essentially what he always wanted in life, is being the advisor to the Duke of, I think it was Lu, and political shenanigans happened. He got exiled, and ultimately his work in exile, just kind of preaching his philosophy, was more impactful in the long term, even though that took centuries to come to fruition, because you had Shi Huangdi kind of establishing the Chinese Empire and basically doing everything Confucius said not to do. But then the Han Dynasty occurred in the late or early 2nd century BC, and his philosophy became a mainstay of Chinese civilization for thousands of years.
I think the question also is what do we really want, right? And I think when you think big picture, we want to reclaim civilization, or even just restore the America that our grandparents had, right? I would tend to agree, maybe some miracle it happens, but the cards are very stacked against being able to do that, and who knows what's going to happen in the future, whatever. But I think maybe and this kind of why I brought up the state level thing too, is that when you view politics as more so this local central thing to yourself and those close to you, can we salvage a situation where people are, or at least us, or we are able to I don't know, just raise a family, have a house, live like a decent life, maybe live a shell of what the American dream used to be. Like, I think that's a realistic maybe goal or something to expect or a reason to be invested in politics, right? And the political situation definitely impacts your ability to do those things, right? And that's kind of like my, I guess, motivation or the reason why I find myself invested in politics nowadays is not always about like this big civilizational reconquest, more so of, well, especially at the state level, like, and federal politics obviously too, like just the ability to live a decent life.
I'm not really
raise,
sure
you know what I mean?
those are two different things, though, or necessarily in opposition to each other.
Well,
Because-
no, of course they're not, right? The civilization versus the personal, obviously. I'm just saying, like, I'm more responding to the question of like the black pill or whatever, or of just not finding yourself super invested in the whole process, right? Because you can look at it and be like, well, the demographics, the enfranchisement, everything, like, there's no way that, not that there's no way, but like it just doesn't seem like there's a political solution to any of this, right? But maybe when you think of it at a more personal level of, well, can I perpetuate a situation where my life is a little bit better? Like, I think that's a realistic,
Absolutely.
you know,
Yeah. No,
Yeah, I agree.
that's
Yeah.
and I'm not.
Yeah,
I'm,
no,
and
I-
I'm not. I am anti like black pilling on life. Like I made a video yesterday where I was basically ranting against the, it's too hard to have sort of a family sort of thing and whatnot. Like I'm 30 years old. I'm married. I got 2 kids. I'm sole provider, and it's possible, right? So I don't want to black pill people on that. I'm just saying that in terms of what's likely to happen to yield us more wholesome outcomes that we want, I don't think it's necessarily going to occur through the typical method. Or if it does, it's going to be sort of a weird FDR situation where it's like democracy, democracy on paper, but in reality, it's something quite different. And I'm not sure what that future of America looks like. Personally, I think much of America is getting what it deserves. It's sad, but I think the United States is frankly, and the West at large is frankly under like divine judgment from God at this point.
Ulysses S. Grant said,
probably.
every country has the government it deserves.
Yeah, and
Wasn't
I
that
think
Joseph de Maistre?
I thought it was Ulysses
they
S.
might
Grant said it.
they might have
been
both
him.
said it, but I do know de Maistre said that. Yeah, but long story short, yes, politics works, but only if you don't have sort of a totally debased, give me the Gibbs sort of people possessed by a destructive progressive ideology. So if you're in an environment where that politics is possible, go for it. Yes, participate in the process. As Settler knows, but I don't think Vince does. I lived in South Africa for the previous 5 years, and there's one province which is notably more civilized and better, and things work more than the rest of the country by far. And part of that has to do with the fact that the provincial government and the municipal governments are, to a large degree, significantly more competent and less corrupt than the ANC, right? So literally every municipality in the country is failing audits and is bankrupt and can't pay salaries for like city employees, except for in this one place. And there's like sewage in the streets and potholes don't get fixed. We're talking like real nuts and bolts, just managing to hold, the infrastructure and basic services together. And that stuff matters, especially when you have kids and, you're like, all right, great. I don't want to, if some nonsense happens and I have to call the police, they're not going to show up, and, oh, great, another pothole broke my wheel, or, the security is so bad I have to get taxed to pay for police, and then I have to buy private security on the back of that because the police are totally incompetent at their job. Like, it's pretty bad. But there are pockets, nevertheless, pockets of real civilization and order, and frankly, really nice qualities of life to be found, even in a country like that, in areas where people sort of take ownership and are able to, create order in their own backyards. So, but as far as like a national solution for that, whether in South Africa or the United States, I'm not sure if the current process, I won't say the system, but the current process as it exists is going to provide any answers. But you can have a different process arise, right, within the same system, which is sort of, I'm not going to hint at what that could be, but I think we all know. So, but anyways, I think I'm going to have to bounce, guys. I got to go pick up my brother, but this has been fun.
Yeah, no worries. Do you want to
I'm,
show your channel before you leave?
Sure, yeah, of course. Everyone go subscribe to Mr. Patriarch. I believe the links can be found in the description. I just had a stream with Red Hawk yesterday. Cozy Thanksgiving stream. That'll be coming out next week. And I did a live stream with Chris Guard and Prudentialist as sort of impromptu guests last night on the video is titled "A Polemic Against the Anti-Family Materialist Right-Wing Bean Counters." So, yeah, go check that out. I'll have another stream coming out in a couple of weeks. I'm thinking on with some other base dads on how to find good women and raise family and stuff. And yeah, maybe some more reflections of a Russian statesman videos. But that's what I got. Go check it out. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
no, I only saw like the first 15 minutes. I haven't finished it yet, but I was watching that stream of yours yesterday. It was very good. I'd highly recommend it.
Thanks, man. All right. Nice to meet you, Vince, and
Nice to meet
see
you.
you again, Fritz.
Yep. I think I'm also going to head out soon.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a pleasure being on the stream. I think good conversation up my eyes, because I think I could feel a little too jaded about even local politics, but I think there is actual work to be done there. But in any ways, if you'd like me to show my channel, or
Yeah, go ahead.
I'm Fritz Imperial, but I've been wanting to do more and more live streaming on Twitch. I'm trying to be more of a normie doing video games, because I have a lot of my backlog, and I'm like, you know what, I could stream these and for other people. So you can follow me on twitch.tv/Fritz Imperial. I'm trying to establish a set schedule. But yeah, and also a happy feast day of Christ the King, Ave Christus Rex. That's about all I have to say. God bless, and see you guys later.
Yeah, thank you very much for joining us today, Fritz.
I
And
assume you're closing out the stream now.
yeah. I would like to say some final thoughts to what had previously
ahead.
been said before everyone decided to just leave me, the world famous Settler's Lament. I just want to say that yes, I agreed with most of what you guys had been saying at the end there. That some people have supposed that I'm a total black pillar. I suppose that might have something to do with Lament being 50% of my name. But it also has something to do with a lot of the people I associate with, I suppose that. But I want to make it clear, I do not, and I have never supported complete political abstinence. That you can feel free to look through my backlog, everyone. There has never been a point when I said don't vote ever. There have been times when I said that there are elections that should be abstained from. I think that's generally the case here in Canada. But that's because of particular problems with all Canadian political parties. I have not, and I doubt I ever will, as a blanket policy, support complete political abstention. And I think it's important for us to remember that this is something I just was thinking about recently, that I really admire boomers when, like, sometimes I try to explain politics to like my boomer family members, and they'll be like, and they'll be like, oh, I think Trump is going to get like 60% of the vote in this next election. And I'm like, no, that's not possible. It's not possible for Trump to do that. That's not how elections work. But they're actually right, and I'm wrong. Because if we really believed that miracles are possible, if we really acted like the Christians that we say we are, then we'd realize that that like Trump winning by 60%, that's not any more miraculous than many times that Christian civilization has been saved throughout history. And yeah, I'm not saying it's likely. I'm not saying that it's going to happen. But even though it seems like the long-term trends are negative, that's not a reason to just check out of the system. That's not a reason to still try to fight, to still try to have positive change. And maybe one day the boomers will be right that Trump or some based successor of Trump will get like 70% of the vote in an election, and the libtards will all be completely defeated. I mean, is that any crazier than Saint Constantine 1700 years ago converting and making the empire that killed Christ the first Christian empire? I don't think so. And that I think that if we really believe that miracles are possible, we should be open to political miracles, to this being turned around. But that's not up to us to just wait around hoping that things will change. We need to do our part. If there are positive political changes we can do, we need to work for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's basically my ending sermon, I suppose. What would you have to say to Shill or whatever, Vince?
Well, I guess you could check out my channel. Obviously, it's my name, Vince Dow, and then obviously go subscribe to American Virtue. Can I say one last thing on this whole discussion? Yeah. I think part of my perspective on this, and part of why I'm like, I'm generally black-pilled on the federal situation. Like, I am an advocate of staying invested in it. I'm not hoping for the best out of that, obviously. But I grew up in California. Okay, so I grew up in Los Angeles, libtard central, whatever. And then recently in the last year, I moved to Florida, right, which is the conservative stronghold or whatever. And I look at the situation here, and it's like, sure, we still live in a country that has so many problems, and a lot of it sucks or whatever. But I guess when you go from a situation that is that bad to generally pretty good, I look at this like, yeah, I don't know if we're ever going to reclaim Washington, D.C. or have the great, American Caesar, whatever. But I look around this situation, and I'm like, this is a place, a state, a situation where, like, I could get some land, I could raise a family or whatever, and I could live a pretty decent life, you know what I mean? And I look at that and I'm like, well, then there is a reason to still be invested in the political situation, especially at the state level. And I think there is a scenario. I know the populist types are usually very fixated on this like national reclamation of America, which I obviously want to happen. Like you said, I don't know if it's a guarantee or whatever, but there is definitely an outcome where there is just a weakened kind of whatever federal government that's just there, and it all kind of sucks. But where we live in our little pockets or whatever, we can raise a future and we can live a decent life. You know what I mean? But yeah, subscribe to my channel, obviously.
Yeah. No, that's all interesting. And thank you again for joining us. And thank you everyone very much for watching. That's it for today. Goodbye, God bless, and God save the king.